How many times has it happened that somebody decided they knew the schedule of things and said, okay, the day of the Lord is at hand, the end is near, prepare to meet your Maker, and it will be next Tuesday afternoon at 2:37 p.m. Central Standard Time, so be ready. And there are people who laugh at that, and others who take it very seriously and get ready and wait and watch. And when 2 o'clock approaches, they're in place somewhere, and 2:30, and they're on edge, and then 2:35, and they're leaning in, and 2:37 comes, and then 2:40, and then 2:45, and then 3:30, and then 4 o'clock, and then it's time to go home for supper, and everybody leaves or filters away, and some are shaking their heads, and some are laughing, and some are cursing, and some are crying, and some are thinking, what an idiot I was to believe that again. And then it's back to business as usual until the next time. How many times has that happened? Well, I'm not predicting any dates, but this could be it. Given what's happening with our climate and the atmosphere heating up, the temperature of the earth going up, and the number of people who have some influence and power who say it's a hoax. It's not that serious. It's a natural occurrence. It's just a cycle. Well, death is a natural occurrence. And it's not that serious unless it's yours or someone close to you. There was a cartoon maybe 3 weeks ago in the paper, and the earth was in a hospital bed with a thermometer in its mouth, and the doctor was standing at the end of the bed looking at the chart and saying, well, your temperature keeps going up, but not to worry, because that's just the way your body fights off and gets rid of an infection. Suggesting what? That we are the infection. And if so, the end is near. I think Jesus thought the end was near. Given the state of the world and the condition of his people and the leadership and the corruption in the temple and how it was all in cahoots with Rome and how awful it was for everyone, he figured, this has got to be it. I'm here to announce the end and to show the new. The end is near. And because the corruption and the dis-ease, the infection was centered in the temple, which was the center of the body of Judaism, well, this thing would be reflected cosmically because it's the center of the world, the center of creation. And so there'll be signs in the heavens and the sun and the moon and the stars, and everything will be in turmoil, and people will see it, and they will themselves be thrown into turmoil. They'll feel this anxiety, this awful feeling inside. They will be scared to death. Or literally, they'll have the breath of life frightened out of them. You know the creation story where God forms the human being of the dust of the earth and then breathes God's own life into it? Well, this would be the uncreation story where that life is frightened out of the body. And that's what fear does. And there's a lesson in that. So Jesus says, that's what's going on. That's what's going to happen. So pay attention. And when you see these things occurring, it's kind of like the leaves sprouting on the trees in the spring, the fig tree and the other trees. You know why he talks about the fig tree? The fig tree was a symbol of the temple. And in Mark's gospel, during that last week, Jesus curses a fig tree when he goes by because it has no fruit on it. And when they come by later that same day, I think, it's dead. It's a statement about the temple. Well, Luke writes 15 years later, about 85 in that first century, and the temple has been gone for 15 years, so it's not just the fig tree, it's all the trees, it's the signs of nature. And when you see these things happen, prepare yourselves. And don't be distracted by the extraneous stuff that you pay attention to all the time, that we all do? Did you unplug the iron before you left home today? Do you have the leaves out of the gutters? Because one of these days, it's going to rain, snow, and it's going to freeze in there. That'll be a terrible mess. Do you have enough coffee to get through the week? When did you at last have the oil changed on your car? Because we're not driving as much, and so it goes a long time, and that could cause real troubles, All those things, your portfolio, your pension, all that stuff we pay. Now, those are not even secondary. Pay attention to what matters and listen to what's going on in here. And when you feel and see this happening, well, then what should you do? Anakupto. You like that? Anakupto. It's the Greek word that means stand up. You should put it in the bulletin with the asterisk. The asterisk means anakupto. Stand up, raise your heads. As sort of the boom is being lowered on the world, stand up and raise your heads and look around, because you know who you belong to. Your redemption is at hand. God is coming into this world anew. The time is here. This is Luke's way of sort of bolstering his community, or her community. Luke could have been a woman, possibly. Certainly sympathetic to women. What this is called is apocalyptic eschatology, or eschatological apocalyptic, whichever you want. Big words. Eschatology, the eschaton, the study of having to do with the end times, and apocalypticism, a revealing, a taking off the cover to show what's inside, what's underneath, what's at the heart of things. This sort of writing or literature became prominent about 300 BC to about 100 CE, when Alexander the Great was conquering the known world, and the Greeks come in and roll over Judea and Galilee, and then the Romans follow up during that period of time, that 400-year period of time, which was terrible for everyday Jews. This sort of literature was powerful for them. And so you see it in Daniel and in Ezekiel, and then in the New Testament at the end, the revelation of John, the apocalypse. And what it talks about, or what it is an oppressed people looking at world events and interpreting those events in a way that gives them hope. So the world is coming to an end. We don't have a stake in this world anyway. We're powerless. So this is good news to us. It was useful literature for Jews of Jesus' time. It was a useful way of looking at things for the pilgrims when they are deciding to leave England and come to a new world. God is guiding us to a new place, a new life, a new world. It was helpful for slaves in this country because they had no power, and for 400 years they're in bondage. So you look to someone to come from beyond to rescue you from this awful existence. And it was helpful for the early church as they wait for Jesus to return. He was supposed to have been here by now. He's not here yet. What's keeping him? And they look at their watches, and they look at each other, and they look at their calendars, and they look at the world around them, and they are getting older, and their loved ones are dying, and their communities are struggling, and the world just keeps going on and on the same old stinking way. The wonderful world ain't so wonderful for some all the time. Or does it? Does it just keep going on? Last Sunday morning, I couldn't be here because the gathering was inside. Sunday afternoon, I was part of a small group that gathered in a little country cemetery about an hour west of here. And we were there to mark the death of Julie's mom and to bury her body while the wind tried to peel us off the hilltop on which this little cemetery was located. You remember last Sunday, what it was like? Yeah. Louise Grenath Lanto was intelligent and talented, artistic, well-read, curious, insightful. She loved biblical archaeology and biblical studies. She would give me things to read that I had no clue of. She would dig into stuff. She was something. She was tough. She was resilient. She was adaptable. She had a really tough life early on. But she kept on. And from the last 5 or 6 years, she just slowly exited. You know how that goes. Through dementia, she just faded, and those qualities that we knew in her went away. And it was this long process, and it just seemed to go on and on and on, and then all of a sudden it's over, and she's gone. Well, she and her husband Stanley had planned to have green burials. And in their case, what that meant was no embalming of the body, no makeup, no casket, no vault, no astroturf around the grave to make it look nice. Just the body and that open place in the earth. When you do it that way, which is the way it was done for centuries, you have 72 hours now by law to have the body buried. So Louise died late Thursday night or early Friday morning last week. Sunday afternoon, we're gathered to bury her body. The pastor from their home church came out that in the afternoon to lead us in this very Lutheran and rather lengthy service, complete with sermon. Not a long sermon, not like this one, but long enough. And when we said the words, recited the creed and the Lord's Prayer, the wind ripped the words from our mouths and carried them off to the south and the southeast. And I wondered if there are chunks of them hanging in the trees and stuck in the leaves in the lawns of people in Iowa and Missouri and Illinois, because they disappeared before we could hear them. And when, at Louise's request, we sang, "I'll be there. I'll be there to hear your mourning cry. I was there to hear your mourning cry. I'll be there when you are old. I rejoice the day you were baptized to see your life unfold." Some of our voices failed at that point. And so the wind sang for us. And it sang through us. It could have sung a little bit more gently, a little softer, but it carried us while we hung on. And then when the words were done, we simply lifted the body that was wrapped in a linen shroud and slowly, gently lowered it into the grave. And then we covered it up. And it was so stark and so cold and so surreal and so hard. And the world ended. The world ended. And you know what I'm talking about, some of you, because you've been there. And you'll probably be there again before you get out of here. And if you haven't been there, you will. Because those endings have been going on since the very beginning. And right now, someone's world is ending somewhere, which means a new world is on the way for them. So, Anakupto, stand up, lift up your head. Your redemption is at hand. God is coming to you anew. And that happens. God shows up, you know, in the most wondrous ways, surprising and matter of fact, and cosmic and wondrous and earthy and simple and mundane. So this woman was contacted by a minister to come and sing at a graveside service for a man who had no family. And she had sung at a lot of funerals and memorial services, so this was just not a big deal. But this would be at a cemetery some distance away, and she didn't know where it was, and she wasn't familiar with it. She's directionally challenged. And so she made sure that she had her GPS ready and she had the information in that, so it had the route for her and everything was fine. And she left in plenty of time to get there early. But you know how it works sometimes with GPS is out in the country and you go down this road and, oh, that road is closed off for some reason, the bridge is, whatever, detour. And she got turned around, and while it was recalibrating, she couldn't recalibrate, and she got terribly lost, totally disoriented. Finally, she arrives an hour late. The pastor is gone. The funeral director and the hearse are gone. Whoever else was there, they're gone. The only people there are the three men who were there to open the grave and now to close it up. And she feels awful. And so she gets out of her car and she walks to the grave and she looks in, and the cover is already on the vault, so it's all done except to put the dirt in. And her heart is so heavy and she can't do anything except maybe she could still sing. So she does. She sings Amazing Grace. How sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, now I'm found, was blind, now I see. Through many dangers, toils, and snares I have already come. It's grace that's brought me safe thus far, and grace will bring me home. And by the time she's finishing this up, when we've been there 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun, we've no less days to sing God's praise than when we first begun. She's just belting it out, pouring her heart out, and she's weeping, and the grave diggers are weeping. And she finishes, and she takes some dirt and drops it into the grave, and then she walks back to the car. And as she's about to get into her car, she hears one of the men say loudly, I ain't never seen nothing like that before, and I've been putting in septic tanks for 20 years. So she's still lost. But that story found its way to us and was waiting for us on Sunday when we got back from that service. And I read it and I laughed so hard, and I shared it with Julie, and she laughed. In the face of death, in the wake of loss. Anakupto. Stand up. Lift up your hearts, lift up your voices, laugh and sing, because your redemption is at hand. And God is with you already in Christ. Thank God. Amen.